Thank you very much. This has been a wonderful day already. I'm delighted to finally be in this country. I haven't been to the Czech Republic before. I'm delighted to be here at this university, and I'm delighted to be part of this conference. So I'm kicking off the conference on lying, and today you're going to get a mixture of a history lesson and I hope some original thoughts about the topic of lying in philosophy. And I'm going to try to present this in a combined way. There's a handout which I will be sometimes reading from, and which will have things written out in English, because sometimes I expect that will be an issue because the examples are from movies or from jokes, and it might be helpful to have that. I'm also going to have this board behind me, so sometimes I will turn back to the board. The board is basically going to give you the main positions in the talk. So it's a summary of the handout, if you like. But sometimes it's easier to explain something with a board in this way. Okay, so lying. Right now, we're in 2019, and the philosophy of lying is a very active field with many, many people writing about lying from different perspectives. But in philosophy, let me just tell you right now, there's this big fight between two groups of philosophers writing on lying. One group of philosophers, which years ago I called deceptionists, believe that all lying is deceptive. That seems like a normal thing to believe, but it's controversial. All lies attempt to deceive people. Another group of philosophers, whom I called non-deceptionists, believe that actually some lies are trying to deceive and some lies are not trying to deceive. And they're interested in what's common to lies that don't deceive and that deceive. So the first thing on the handout I just say is that those two groups, in the literature, one group is called deceptionists. The other group, the name for them varies a little bit. Sometimes they're called just non-deceptionists. Other times the name is simpler. It's people who believe in giving an account of lying in terms of assertion. So assertion-based accounts of lying. So if I say assertion-based, I mean they don't believe that all lies are tried to deceive, but that's just terminology. The main thing to remember is some people believe they all deceive, many believe they don't all deceive. So in point 2, I just give a quick history note in the handout. I don't have it on the board yet. It's just saying, look, even though we have philosophers who think that lies don't have to deceive, everybody, when you go back to what they originally said something rather simple and straightforward, and apparently they all held it in common, which is that lies are untruthful assertions. And today, what we're going to have to do is try to explain why, even though all these philosophers who disagree, right, still think lies are untruthful assertions. And the disagreement between them is what we mean when we say a lie is an untruthful assertion. So it's actually about a disagreement about what that means. That's the battle or the division today in the philosophy of lying. Okay, so let me start with a simple definition of lying that nobody agrees with and nobody accepts, okay? But it's like basic 101 attempt to define lying before the philosophers got very sophisticated. So I have it as point 3 on the handout, but actually on the board, I'm going to try and make it as simple as possible here. So the sort of quick, not very philosophically deep attempt to define a lie. And I gave as an example to be repeated in this handout because I was in Vienna, and that's where Freud was, and this was Freud's favorite joke. We'll get to that. I gave as the example, if I say to you, I'm going to Pinsk, right? I guess Pinsk is a town in Moscow or in Russia, right? I don't even know, but he had this joke about this we'll get to. Anyway, I say I'm going to this town, right? So I make a statement to you. I have an audience, I make a statement to you, going to Pinsk. And I believe that to be false. I'm not going to Pinsk. Now, so far, we have something that might be a joke, it might be on stage, it might be being ironic. But now we add something else. I intend that you believe what I just said, right? So say something false to you, right? I believe it's false, I say it to you, I want you to believe it. That seems like a lie. But actually, most philosophers have said, no, there's something missing here. Lies are more sophisticated than just that. And what I want to try and do today is to explain why lies are supposed to be more sophisticated than just that. And then you can see if you think this is going way too much into detail and we actually should go back to something simple. Or if you agree with me that it should get more sophisticated, that there's some missing ingredient to lying, as well as what I just said, you then maybe decide which of the camps you fall into. So, as I said, that's a simple starting point. Now, what I want to begin with right now is thinking about your audience. So when we give a definition of lying, we're usually assuming the audience is just an innocent audience. They don't have any particular thoughts about whether you are a liar or not a liar. They start out innocent. But what I want us to think about is, what about a context in which they actually don't trust you? If your audience is a distrustful audience, should something be going on that's different from a normal case of attempting to deceive people with a lie? So, what I want to think about is when an audience believes you to be a deceptive person. So I've given an example in section 5 on the handout, which is, we're not yet talking about liars, we're just talking about somebody, and the audience believes that he's a liar. So I know people have seen the movie Little Big Man with Dustin Hoffman? Right. So there's this wonderful scene. So Dustin Hoffman plays a white man who has been raised by the Native Americans, and he ends up being hired by General George Custer as a guide. He calls him the mule skinner because he's a low-level guide. And Custer is going to go down into the valley of the Little Bighorn. I hope people know about that part of American history, right? He's going to go down and fight a group of Sioux and Cheyenne braves. And he says to Dustin Hoffman's character, who is Jack Crabb, he says, you know, should I go down into that valley? What should I expect? And what Jack Crabb, the man who lived with the Indians, thinks is, there are thousands of braves down there. They ain't helpless women and children waiting for you. They're Cheyenne, Brave, and Sioux. You go down there if you got the nerve. So he tells Custer, look, you go down there, you know, they're going to kill you. And Custer thinks, aha, you know, you were raised with Native Americans or Indians. You're a liar. You were with people who are liars. So Custer says to him, still trying to outsmart me, aren't you, mule skinner? You want me to think that you don't want me to go down there. But the subtle truth is, you really don't want me to go down there. Now just think about that. So Custer thinks that this guy who is being totally honest is trying to deceive him. He's saying to him, yeah, go down there and you'll get killed, because he doesn't want Custer to go down there. And Custer says, you know what? I'm actually going to go down there because I'm not going to get killed, because you're a liar. And of course, he goes down there and he gets killed, because Dustin Hoffman's character was telling him the truth. So the audience distrusted a truthful statement. Now, what I want to think about is, what about a situation in which the audience is going to distrust you? You know that about your audience, but you actually want to trick them. You actually want them to believe something that's false, but they don't trust you. And so you're thinking, how do I do this? So the tactic that people use, simple tactic, would be the following: what's called a double bluff. You say what's true in order to get them to believe what's false, right? So Augustine gives a case where there's a person who thinks he's a liar, and the person asks him, you know, should I take this road or that road? Is that road going to be dangerous? And what you say is, yeah, that road is going to be dangerous. You're going to die if you're on that road. And you say that because you know he thinks you're somebody not to be trusted. You know that he will think that road must be okay, and he will take that road, and he will get killed. So you deceived him, but you did it with telling the truth. Now that would fail to be a lie, because it's something that you believe to be true, even though you get him deceived. Now, a double bluff is something that we talk about all the time commonly, but Freud's favorite joke is what I want to use as my example throughout the paper. So Freud has imagined these two people, and again, I'm assuming for the sake of the argument that they know each other well enough. So this is the bottom of page, first page, bottom of 6. So imagine Trophim, I guess, which is one of the characters, who says, "Where are you going?" And Pavel says, "To Pinsk." And Trophim says, "Liar! You say that you're going to Pinsk in order to make me believe that you're going to Minsk, but I know you're going to Pinsk." Right? So you have a person who thinks that the person is trying to sort of double bluff them, and who says, now, he calls him a liar, but of course, strictly speaking, he didn't lie. He just tried to deceive him with the truth, but he tried to deceive him, so the character in the story calls him a liar. Now, what I want to imagine is there's a more complicated version of this story. And I know this is going to get to levels of deception that you maybe don't want to get into because, you know, it's a nice day. But think about really complex attempts to deceive when your audience is actually thinking that you're a liar and trying to deceive them. What do you do? So what I want us to think about is a case that's not talked about quite so much. It's called the triple bluff. So go back to the case of these two guys, Trophim and Pavel, right? Trophim is asking Pavel, "Where are you going?" And Pavel wants to deceive Trophim, but he knows if he just tells him what's true, you know, Trophim will think, aha, he's trying to get me to believe something else, so I will actually not be deceived because I will know really that he just told me the truth. And so in fact, because he thinks I'm going to convert his statement to a falsehood, I'm actually not going to do that. Now, what happens when you know that that's what your audience is going to do? You know if you tell him the truth, so that he'll convert it into a falsehood, that he won't do that. So if you tell him the truth, he's going to believe the truth. What's your move? Well, you want to start calculating, and you put, oh, okay, you know what? How about I tell him the falsehood, and he thinks I was telling him the truth and trying to, so I'll tell him the falsehood, and he'll do the same thing to my falsehood that he did to my truth. He'll believe my falsehood, yay, he'll be deceived, right? So this is a tactical thing that you do because your audience distrusts you. Now, what I want to say is that there's a famous scene in a famous movie. Now, you maybe hadn't all seen Little Big Man, but I hope all of you have seen The Princess Bride, okay? If you haven't seen The Princess Bride, it's far more important than this lecture. Go and see it. It is one of the greatest movies of all time. But there's this wonderful scene in this film where you have a very, very, very wise, learned, intelligent man who is an assassin. That's Vizzini. And you have a good hero who is trying to fight with him called Dread Pirate Roberts. Names aren't important. So here's what happens. He has, actually, I didn't realize I have two props. This is good. He has two glasses of wine. And he turns around and he puts poison in one of the glasses of the wine. And he turns around. And then he puts one glass in front of the other person and one glass in front of him. He says, okay, one of these is poisoned. Which one do you choose? Right? Now, Vizzini, I can almost remember the quote. Vizzini says, well, you know, I mean, obviously, you know that I'm smart. So you know that I wouldn't just drink the wine in front of me because that'd be stupid, right? So I got to reach for the one in front of you, right? But you knew that I would reach for the one in front of you, right? So you thought of that already. So you put the poison in the one in front of me, didn't you? And that's the beginning. And of course, so he keeps on figuring out. So the point is, it keeps escalating. Like, so you anticipate that I'm going to try to deceive. So that's what a triple bluff is. It's you're trying to anticipate that the other person will think that you're going to do something, but you end up going back to the original kind of case. You end up going back to saying the falsehood rather than the truth, because that's the way to counteract his response to your original attempt. So the double bluff will fail, you go to the triple bluff. So imagine that we change the example with Trofim and Pavel and say, Trofim asks Pavel, where are you going? And Pavel says, I'm going to Minsk. When he's not, he's going to Pinsk. But he thinks that Trofim will reinterpret that. So at that point, it's basically tactics. Because then Trofim can say, well, he's going to do that, and I'm going to do that, and so there's no end. Now, you don't have to worry too much about the detail, except to understand that you have an audience that's thinking that you're going to say something, and you anticipate that, and you try to counteract that. So that's an example that is maybe an unusual case where, and this is what's important now, you make a statement, the statement is false, you intend that your audience believe it, but how does your audience get to believe the falsehood? Not because they trust you, but because you are tactically trying to get them to believe something against their attempt to counteract your tactics. So they're distrusting. So we have to imagine, I didn't have this in the paper because I don't know of a particular example. Imagine that it's a different kind of United States with a different kind of president. Like it's back in the 1960s, and it's like, Kennedy going in to negotiate with Khrushchev, or with one of the, or Kennedy's men going in to negotiate with Khrushchev's men. I mean, again, it would have been all a bunch of men in this room. But imagine like, so I'm going to tell the Russians something. They're going to think that so I'm going to think, so you're negotiating with a group of people who think you're a liar, but who still have to negotiate with you. What would you do? Would you tell them the truth and make them think, well, they're definitely not doing that? Or would you tell them the falsehood because they think you're going to tell them the truth and they're going to know it's the truth? So what do you do in a situation like this? And as I said, you might go for the triple bluff and just see if that's going to work. But there's another case that I want you to think about as a case where your audience distrusts you and you say something to them, but you are going to try to get them to believe the falsehood, but again, not because they trust you, but because of some sort of weird, anticipating what you would say, anticipating that you're kind of trying to be secretive or deceptive. So the case I have in mind, and it's actually the last of the examples of a triple bluff, number 4, is called the irony lie. I don't believe this is a lie, but it's a fun case that one of my students came up with. So one of their friends, wants everybody to believe that he is now going out with somebody, that he now has a girlfriend. But if he comes straight out and says to people, I have a girlfriend, that won't work. That's like, no. So what he has to do is, they say, come on, you have a girlfriend, right? We know you have a girlfriend. You've been disappearing for hours and you're not talking to us as much. And you go, yeah, right, I have a girlfriend. And you say that in order to get them to really believe you have a girlfriend, right? You say a kind of ironic statement, because if you sort of say, yeah, sure, I have a girlfriend, they're thinking, so he's not denying it. He's being ironic in denying. That means he really must have a girlfriend, right? He's not joking, he actually does have a girlfriend. Now, you might not think this is a wonderful example of how to deceive your friends. But what's interesting is in the debates about what lies are, what I just said is not believed to be a lie. It's not believed to be a lie because the only way that works is with an ironic statement. And ironic statements are supposed to be cases where they're not really lies. So I could use an ironic statement that was false to get to deceive my audience, but it's not supposed to be a case of a lie. If you think that's the case of a lie, that's interesting. The philosophers do not. So, what I'm trying to push is that the philosophers who are worried about this definition being too simple will say that all these triple bluff cases meet these conditions. I make a statement, I believe it to be false, I intend that you believe it. So it meets all those conditions. But they don't think it's really a lie because I'm only getting you to believe this in a very unusual way, in this kind of tactical, strategic way where I'm trying to get over the fact that they don't trust me. So something is missing, according to these philosophers. What is it? And this is the history lesson. So what actually happens is that in these cases, and there's a technical way of explaining what's going on. I'll try to do the technical, and then hopefully there's a more intuitive way of explaining it. What's going on in these cases is that the person in the triple bluff and the girlfriend case has got a series of deceptive intentions. And I've listed them at the bottom of page 2. So there are 3 in total. I want to explain the first 2 and then the last one and explain what the problem is then. So the first kind of deceptive intention that the triple bluff person has and the girlfriend person has is they want you to believe something false. They want you to believe something false, that you are going to Minsk when you're not. They also want you to believe, and this is usually the case, but just to be clear, they want the audience to believe that they believe this to be true, that they believe that they're going to Minsk. That's also false. So there are 2 deceptive intentions that they have, right? The typical triple bluff person. They want you to believe something, and they want you to believe that you believe that thing. And both of those are false, because you don't believe it, and it's not true. But there's a third thing, and this is what's different. So in the case of triple bluffing and girlfriend cases, they actually want you to believe something about the intentions that you have. So this is where I say, in the case of deception, where we've got the triple bluff, as well as a deception about the world and about the mind or the beliefs of the person speaking, there's also an attempt to deceive about intentions. And I'll just read this because it's hard to explain it, but I'll try to give an example where it works. So the bottom of page 2. So this is the case with a triple bluffer, right, who's trying to deceive an audience about what he's doing. You intend your audience to believe that you do not intend them to believe it. That's hard, right? You intend your audience to believe that you don't intend them to believe it. In other words, you intend your audience to believe that you intend them to believe something else. You make a falsehood. You intend them to believe something else. All right, so you intend them to believe that you intend them to believe something else. In fact, it's not true. You actually intend them to believe the falsehood that you just said. Now again, it's a complicated... The point is, you want them to have 3 falsehoods that they believe, not 2. The falsehood about what you're doing, the falsehood about what you believe, and a falsehood about what you intend them to believe. So a triple bluffer has 3 deceptions that he or she is perpetrating on his audience. Now, I probably can't do a better job of summarizing it than that sentence, but I will try to explain in other cases where this becomes a problem. Okay, so I want to move to page 3 of the handout, and I now want to say what it is about the missing element from what are supposed to be these multiple deceptive triple bluff cases that philosophers are really concerned with, and that they think make these to be rather peculiar attempts at deception, but not in fact in the end fully lies. Okay, so this is what I call simple deceptionism. Simple deceptionism doesn't care how you get people to be deceived. with your falsehood. So long as you get people to be deceived with your falsehood, it doesn't matter that you are trying to manipulate their distrustful beliefs about you. That doesn't matter. You just get them there. Lying, on the other hand, does care about how you got them to believe the falsehood, according to these philosophers. So what they think is this is too simple and you need something more complex. Now, you could at this point say, you know what? I don't agree with these philosophers. I think this guy is a liar. The guy who is trying to get Pavel trying to get Trofim to believe, he's a liar. And you could say the kid who says to his friends, yeah, right, I have a girlfriend. You could say he's a liar. If that's what you're happy with, you can leave now. Well, no. But you can be happy that if you think there's something funny about, you know, the Russians are there, the negotiators are here, you want them to believe a falsehood, you say false things, but you believe that they'll believe them because they distrust you, and they anticipate your move, and they make the mistake of not being quite smart enough, and they believe the falsehood. I think, that's not lying. That's like manipulation with false statements, but it's not lying. Or you might think the guy who says, yeah, right, sure I have a girlfriend, yeah, right. Or actually, no, make the voice better. Yeah, right, I have a girlfriend. You might think, he's not really lying. He's trying to deceive his audience, and he's being very clever, but it's not really lying. So if you think there's something funny about these cases, then you're on board with the philosophers who think this is too simple, and you move into the group of philosophers known as complex deceptionists. Complex deceptionists believe there's some missing ingredient in a lie that's being left out so far. Okay, so let's go down to section 8 then on page 3. I realized when I was talking about this for the first time that in the English language we talk about double bluff and triple bluff, but we never talk about just simple bluff because we don't think that needs to be given a special name. Simple bluff is just lying. Or for the purposes of my talk, simple bluff is just lying. So what is it that's going on in simple bluff that's not going on in double or triple bluff that they think is actually something more? Okay, so here's the way that it might be explained. Okay, imagine that you're talking about a person who is a simple bluffer or a liar, and here's what's going on. I'm the liar, you're my audience, right? I want you to believe, and now I guess I'm going to go back to the original statement, but you're not a distrustful audience, you're just a regular Joe audience. You would normally believe what I say, right? So I say to you, I'm going to Pinsk. You ask me, where are you going? I'm going to Pinsk. You're not. So I want you to believe that I'm going to Pinsk. And I want you to believe that I believe I'm going to Pinsk, right? But I also want you to believe that I intend you to believe that I intend you to believe that. I want my audience to see me coming as I'm telling you something, and I want you to believe this thing that I just said. Because that's normally, you know, when I say to you, like, I'm going to Pinsk, I want you to believe it, right? That's the normal situation. So the question is, why on earth should you trust somebody? Like, ever? Yeah, I know you're trying to get me to believe that you're going, but why should I believe you? Why do you believe anybody ever when they say things, as it were? What's the reason that you believe them? And this is where the people who are working on lying say, because normally our communications, our statements, are actually in a context of trust. And in fact, what they want to say is, that's how it works. We basically get people to believe things because they trust us. Now, trust is not evidence. We're not talking about how they showed you, here, look, here's my ticket to Pinsk, right? Look at it, right? See, my credit card now says to Pinsk. No, where are you going? I'm going to Pinsk. They trust you because that's what you said. You know, they trust you because... Now, what the philosophers are claiming is, when you make what they call, and this is the word that, again, we said at the beginning, when you make an assertion to somebody, so you're not joking, you're not being ironic, What you're actually calling out is for them to trust you because you said so. That's it. It's like the word sometimes used here is testimony. Do you believe somebody's testimony? So nothing other than the fact that they are being truthful with you. That's the reason why you're supposed to believe them. No special reason, no evidence, just that they're being truthful. We assume people are being truthful. When we know they want us to believe things, we generally believe it because we assume that they're being truthful with us. So that's summarized in the bottom of page 3. But what I want to get at is those philosophers who believe this are now saying to you, not just that you need sort of something else, but the thing that you need to make a lie work, a real lie, is a very, very, very deep and powerful thing, which they even say is part of what it means to actually make an assertion. So they basically say that there's something here which is trust. So you trust in the speaker being truthful, something like that. It doesn't have to be exactly right, but I'm trying to make it such that there's trust in there. So what they think a lie is when you take someone's trust, but now you do something to that trust. You betray that trust. You take advantage of their trust, and you use that trust to make them believe a falsehood. So you extend to me the trust of my being a truthful person, and you believe what I say, and you believe that I'm going to Pinsk when I'm not. So how I worked you was to, as it were, take advantage of your trust. Now, what they want to claim is that I don't do anything special except just say the thing. I don't say, trust me, I'm going to Pinsk. Okay? Just saying, in answer to the question, what are you going? I'm going to Pinsk. That's asking you to trust me that I'm going to Pinsk. Asking you to trust me that I'm being truthful by just saying I'm going to Pinsk. I don't need anything more for me to say or to do. Okay, I shouldn't be like this, I'm going to Pinsk. I shouldn't speak in an ironic tone. I should say normal conversation. They should trust me, I'm speaking, I'm addressing you, trust me, and they trust you. So, according to those philosophers, that's the element that's missing from negotiating with the Russians. It's missing from, yeah, sure, I have a girlfriend. And it's missing from Trofim and Pavel having that exchange. Because they don't trust each other. If they manage to deceive, it's an amazing feat, but it's not because they trusted each other. They deceived in spite of the fact that there was no trust. But lies require this trust. Now, I said already, if you already think those other people are liars, this isn't interesting. If you think they weren't really liars, there was something funny about them, what they were doing, now you're seeing where the philosophers are actually saying something that's maybe interesting. Aha, trust is what's missing in those cases, and trust is what's present in a normal case of a lie. Okay? So that's where we're at. So, I now want to say that we have given you something new to think about for lies. Okay? So, here's what I want to explain then on page 4. This is now a way to explain something that has been interesting. In the past, people have said things, but it wasn't always clear why they were saying what they were saying. So there's a relatively famous British philosopher, W.D. Ross, and I think I've given the third paragraph on page 4. W.D. Ross believed that the rule that you shouldn't lie is actually a rule that we should follow because of two wrong things that lies do. Not one, two wrong things that lies do. So what he says is that the prohibition against lying, I'm reading this now, stems from both considerations of fidelity, which means keeping true to your promise or your word, and non-maleficence, which is not harming, right? So there are two wrongs that every lie does. And the wrong that every lie does is it attempts or succeeds in deceiving you, and it betrays your trust. Now, what's interesting about this claim is that if this is right, then even if you fail to deceive somebody, even if you say, I'm going to Pinsk, and for some reason, whatever it is, you know that I'm lying to you right now, so you're not deceived, right? No deception, because you know that I'm not. You still think, I don't believe it. He lied to me. He, broke my trust in his being truthful. It's already the case that he has done that. Every lie is a betrayal, even if it's not believed by the target audience. Every lie betrays the trust that you are asking them to give you. And if they know that you are lying, the trust has been broken even if there's been no deception that's happened. So that means that there's a double wrong with lying. And what's interesting is, if that's correct, then the triple bluff, even if it succeeds, the triple bluff has a different kind of response. So let's say I managed to deceive the Russians, or deceive my friends. What should my friends or the Russians, I'm sorry to keep on saying the Russians, but they're perfectly good Russians. I mean the people who are being sent by, apologies to any Russians. The Russian negotiators, right, in the Kennedy versus Khrushchev argument over the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? What should the Russian negotiators believe if the US tricked them? Should think, oh, they betrayed us. Those darn Americans. No, they should go, oh, we were so stupid. They outwitted us. Now, you might think there's nothing wrong about deceiving those group of people. You might think, yeah, no problem, deceive them away. They're not doing any good for the world. But even if you think deception is always wrong, what the claim is that the Russians can't say they took advantage of our trust and they violated that trust we had with them and they betrayed us. No. But your friend who lies to you, yeah, you can say that he betrayed your trust or she betrayed your trust. That's totally because it was genuinely what happened in the lie case. Because you trusted them and you saw through them and you're like, this person is, no longer somebody I will trust. So, if you're sympathetic, now you see why some philosophers don't want these to be lies. Because they want lies to have the full-blown betrayal part to it. They want lies to have the double wrong of deception and betrayal, and not just the wrong of deception. Okay, so I did give you a preliminary little summary of what would be the wrongs involved in a lie, the simple bluff. And I said it was deception and betrayal. This is the middle of page 4. And then I said the triple bluff and the double bluff, they end up being wrong if they are wrong, because they're just deceptions, but there's no violations of trust. So they're like, at best, one wrong, whereas the lie is two. Now, that was the point at which I was at in my own thinking about lies until recently. But there's one other thing that we should think about, I think, today, because I'm going in a direction where right now everything I said, you might think that's enough. I've heard enough, I disagree. But imagine if you don't think you've heard enough. And here is another problem that we have in philosophy. I can't go into this problem in as much detail, but the philosophers who said that lies betray trust, they actually believed that there were contexts in which, because your audience distrusted you, you could do this and not be accused of lying. And they actually went even further. They said, you can do this and you're not even making an assertion. So I don't think we have time to go into this, but here's an example that all of you might think is not really a good one, and you might think there's a problem here, but let me just give an example. The one that is brought out by Chisholm and Fian, who is at the bottom of page 4, the robbery at knife point. Immanuel Kant has an example where he says, somebody holds a knife to your throat and says, where's your money or something, right? A stick up, whatever. His is a knife. And what you're supposed to think is that, well, this guy can't possibly believe what I say, right? Who would believe, if I tell him something, he's going to think, yeah, you're lying, right? So they think that in those cases where you're dealing with people who are going to kill you or rob you, they should be clever and they should think that you're going to try to say something false. And so we're in this distrustful context here. And that means even though they're total strangers, you can say false things to them and you're not lying, because the robber, think of it for a second, the thief can't say, "You betrayed me when you told me that falsehood." It seems stupid, right? And he just held a knife to your throat. I mean, that bond of trust between us, it's been lost now. No, come on, give me a break, right? So you might think, even those cases of famous cases, I'm going to another conference next week where we talk about Kant talking about the murderer at the door, right? Saying, "Are you keeping your friend in here? I'm going to kill him. Where is he?" And if you lie to him or you say false things to him, and afterwards he says, "You totally betrayed the trust that we..." Give me a break, right? So they might think that none of those are examples of lies. So that's a problem for the view. You may think it's already got problems, but that's one problem. It looks like you might be able to get away with saying, "I didn't lie to the murderer at the door. I just deceived him." He was like a negotiator that I deceived, but that's not really lying. So that's a problem with this view. So I have to just be clear that it sounds good maybe, but there's a problem there maybe. Now they will counter, and they will say, actually, no, with the murder at the door case, there is a sense of a violation of trust. And so that's how they're going to go. But some people don't agree that that's the way to go. But I'm signposting that you can have that objection. Okay, but let's say you're relatively happy with the idea that lies require violations of trust. And maybe you're okay with some things not being lies because of that. I now want to look to a new issue in the philosophy of lying. And this is on page 5. And the remainder of what I say will just be explaining this new distinction or problem that we have and why it is that we might have to say more about what lies are. So in other words, there might actually be another thing that's happening with the lies and not just the violation of trust. And here is the problem, as some people think. Anyways, it's a problem. I talked about cases of a lie or a simple bluff, and cases of deception that used falsehoods, and cases of deception that used truths. But not every case of a deception that uses a truth is a double bluff. We have to imagine cases of misleading. Now, misleading still falls under the category of deception, but it doesn't use falsehoods, it uses truths. And I want to look at section 10 on page 5 to explain what misleadings are and why people think these are not lies, but why people think they're still a problem. Okay, so first of all, there's linguistic misleading. So the famous one is Bill Clinton. Sorry, I had to get in a dig at Clinton. There is no improper relationship, right? That's when he was talking about his affair. Now, does anybody know what's funny about that statement? There is no improper relationship? Sorry, this would be a class about. The reason is it's the present tense, right? Yeah. At the moment he said that, there was no, at that moment, improper relationship. It had finished. So what he said was true. But why did he say that? Why did he say there is? Because he wanted them to believe that there was never an improper relationship. So it was an attempt to deceive with a truth. Now his audience, we have to believe, would believe that, if they would believe it, because they don't think of him as trying to say something true in order to get a false... No, they think of him as being like trustworthy, right? So they say, oh, okay, so you never had an affair. He's going, yes, and I didn't lie, right? I just told them a truth, and from that they inferred a falsehood. Now, this problem is that some people think misleading is just as bad as lying. Why does it matter that I told a truth and got you to believe a falsehood? Didn't I use the trust? Didn't I get you to trust me that I wasn't trying to be a misleader? So this debate has become a big debate that's a separate debate from defining lying. And right now, there are philosophers going back and forth about why misleading is not as bad as lying. And there are philosophers arguing misleading is just as bad as lying, right? So it's a fight. It's another one of the fights. And what I want to talk about in the final part of my paper is there's actually a new paper by Sam Bursler, which We don't have to agree with everything that she says. It's an excellent paper. But what she says, I think, is true in this respect. She wants to say, and this is point 11, that in the case of misleading, the victim is deceived because they trust the person is not misleading. Right? So in fact, it's got trust violation as well. So like the lie, it's got a trust violation, right? And if it works, like the lie, it's got a deception too. So isn't it the same as a lie? And this is where she says, no. There's one crucial difference between the misleading and the lie. And the crucial difference is that you are using an untruthful assertion to do it. So there's something else going on in the lie that's not going on in the misleading. And what she says, and I don't have the time because I'm going to have to finish, is that extra thing that's going on in the lie is a kind of unfairness in your using the convention of language that we all make use of every day to deceive me. So it's kind of like we all use truthful statements because we need them. We can't navigate our lives without them. We're not gods. We're not invincible. I have to trust you sometimes that you're telling me the truth. You have to trust me, right? And so the liar totally takes advantage of my being truthful with him and returns me untruthfulness. The misleader doesn't quite do that because each case of a misleading is like you have to figure out exactly what was meant. It's context dependent. There isn't a rule for every case of a misleading. I mean, the example that I gave in the paper was Bill Clinton saying there is no improper relationship. Another one would be, are you going to the party tonight? I have to work. Yeah, and after I work, I'm going to the party. But like, it's like there's not a rule in the language that gets you to, because I said I'm going to work, I therefore said I'm not going to the party. I'm not going to the party would be a lie. So the last thing that we can say, the last page of this, and like in the cooking show, can I do this? Woo! There you go. Now we have the final explanation of, according to Sam, and I'm going to, for the time being, say she's got it generally right, I think, if we endorse the view at all. So it turns out that lies are actually the worst kinds of deceptions at all because there's 3 wrong things happening in a lie, not 2, and certainly not just 1. So there's deception. You're trying to deceive the person who is a normal audience. There's betrayal. You take advantage of their trusting in you to being truthful, and you betray that trust because you're untruthful. And it's unfair because you make use of the convention of us having to be truthful with each other and make truthful assertions while paying me back with a lie. So in the case of the triple bluff, all there is at best is the deception. And some people don't even think that's too bad, but in some cases, even with a distrustful audience, it may be a bad thing to be deceiving. In the case of misleading, there's an attempt to deceive, and there's a betrayal of trust, but maybe there isn't quite the abuse of the conventions of language in being truthful with each other that you have in the case of the lie. Now, that's all I can say. What I want to talk about afterwards, if people are interested in, some people think that bald-faced lies, where I tell you something that's false, but it's totally obvious that it's false. If I say to you something like, I am not giving a talk here today, right? Some stupid kind of, I assert what's obviously false, that I'm still abusing language in some way here, even if I don't deceive you or betray your trust. And so if there's something wrong about these guys, it might be the same thing as the last thing that's wrong with lies. So each of them has a piece of what's wrong with the lies, but only the lies of all 3. Or only the truly, deeply philosophical examples of lies that the philosophers are interested in have all 3. And it's those 3 things that together make it the case that lying is the worst kind of deception. Thanks.